The war for food never makes headlines, it does not roar like oil, it does not glitter like gold, but it decides who stands, and who kneels. For decades, Africa's rivers carried fish outward, while its markets filled with frozen imports stamped with foreign labels. Dependency became routine, a quiet surrender hiding in plain sight. But across the Sahel, a different current has begun to move. In landlocked villages where the sea has never been seen, ponds widen, pumps hum, and a truth long denied finally rises to the surface. Africa can feed itself. What began as scattered ponds has become a continental heartbeat, a $2.5 billion refusal to let hunger be dictated by distant shores, because when a nation grows its own food, it grows its freedom. What follows is not development as usual, it is a moral shift, unfolding beneath the stillness of water. For decades, West Africa lived with a contradiction too familiar to name, a continent rich with rivers, lakes, wetlands, and reservoirs imported more than half its protein. Frozen fish from oceans thousands of miles away filled the markets of Ouagadougou and Bamako. Local fishermen watched their nets hang like empty flags. Dependency had become habit, and habits, repeated long enough, start impersonating destiny. But pressure was building beneath the silence. Trade wars in 2024 rattled global supply chains, tariffs rose, sanctions collided, shipping routes slowed to a crawl, and a truth resurfaced: whoever controls food controls freedom. Across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that truth landed like a seed dropped into dry soil. Small meetings began in windowless rooms, maps replaced portraits. Young engineers sketched pond systems on scrap paper, biologists tapped calculations into worn notebooks, soldiers listened quietly in the back. Then came the sentence that changed everything: if we can grow fish, we can grow independence. Softly spoken, but the ripples traveled far. Within months, the Sahel shifted, bulldozers carved reservoirs into red earth, solar pumps rose like metallic trees, shimmering ponds dotted the horizon, each one a mirror reflecting not clouds, but intention. Students trained in hatcheries, farmers experimented with feed made from local crops, veterans built cold rooms and distribution routes, manuals replaced aid brochures, hope replaced dependency. In unmarked villages, people believed that a landlocked nation could raise fish, that protein could be harvested without permission, that sovereignty could begin at the dinner table. The model was simple, but radical. Burkina Faso specialized in hatcheries, Mali built feed production, Niger managed soda-cooled distribution corridors. For the first time, supply chain didn't mean foreign ships, it meant African trucks delivering African food to African markets. Production surged, 600 new aquaculture sites appeared, thousands of jobs were born. Markets that once sold imported cartons began selling fresh tilapia-raised meters from home. In Niger, traders painted two words above their stalls: grown here, fed here. It wasn't propaganda, it was pride, and pride is contagious. Dignity returns to the Sahel. Their revolution spread beyond ponds. Farmers who once queued for aid compared harvests. Women who once sold scraps supplied clinics, schools, and markets. Children who had tasted scarcity learned abundance, grown by hands they recognized. Villages once dependent on convoys now sent refrigerated trucks to neighboring towns. Every ton of fish harvested became a ton of freedom reclaimed. But revolutions, even quiet ones, are never invisible. Far from the Sahel, in office towers with no windows to the desert, a question surfaced: what happens when Africa no longer needs imported protein? Markets felt it first. European seafood exporters warned of collapsing demand. Policy memos spoke of emerging protein walls. Trade analysts predicted a 40% drop in African imports within 2 years. For corporations built on African dependency, this wasn't a statistic, it was a threat. But on the ground, the reaction was different. A fisherman lifted a heavy net and told a journalist, "They used to give us fish in plastic bags. Now they fear the day we stop begging." The sentence spread across the Sahel like dry season wind. Students posted photos of ponds with a simple caption: "We did this." fisherwomen became suppliers, farmers became strategists, communities became architects of their own economy. For decades, every tariff in Brussels rippled through Sahel markets before people even knew why prices changed, but the ponds broke that chain. When global tariffs hit soy, farmers switched to local feed blends. When shipping delays froze supply, Sahel ponds kept producing. When cold chain failures hit Europe, African solar grids hummed without interruption. It wasn't defiance. It was competence, and competence is revolutionary. By early 2025, production tripled, 600 aquaculture sites stretched across the Sahel, tens of thousands of jobs stabilized communities. A boy ran through the market shouting, "They are buying from us." And for the first time in his life, he was right. This wasn't just about food, it was about dignity. Families no longer feared price spikes in foreign capitals, mothers no longer prayed for delayed shipments, children ate food grown steps away. A dependency, that quiet thief of self-worth, no longer ruled the dinner table. Energy grids stabilized around aquaculture hubs, local feed mills kept currency inside borders, cold chains stitched villages into markets and markets into regions. The Sahel had built something the world insisted Africa could not, a self-sustaining food system, and dignity traveled faster than any policy. Feed Africa first. In a village near Dori, a simple sentence echoed across radios and markets. We are not feeding the world. We are feeding ourselves first. Not anger, not nationalism, just clarity, clarity that reshapes nations. Kids drew ponds instead of ports. Women painted slogans on storage silos. Students posted 3 words that became a movement. African institutions soar. The meaning immediately, the AU called it a structural correction to decades of external dependence. ECOWAS debated cold chain corridors instead of conflict zones. Across the continent, one realization spread: food is power, and Africa was taking that power back. The EU responded with tension, the US responded with caution, China responded with opportunity, Russia responded with ideology, Turkey responded with infrastructure, but the world had no choice. Africa was negotiating from strength, not supplication. 3 paths to sovereignty. From the ponds emerged 3 new roads. 1. Infrastructure. Cold chains, solar hatcheries, water systems built for drought and abundance, infrastructure that looks simple, but decides everything. 2. Negotiation. Contracts rewritten, value chains kept domestic, a regional triangle of resilience. Burkina, hatcheries, Mali, feed, Niger, distribution. 3. Continental vision. A blue belt corridor, protein moving across borders like ideas, food security treated not as charity, but strategy. Youth returned home, cooperatives became political forces, refrigerators stayed cold, markets priced by seasons, not crises. Africa, a continent that once rationed hope, now produced enough to trade it. Challenges will come. Smuggling, lobbying, tariffs, climate, pressure, but something fundamental has shifted. Africa is no longer building its food system as a reaction to crisis. It is building it as a declaration. The next era will not be defined by waiting. As ponds widen and cold chains hum, one question forms on the horizon: what does sovereignty become when it finally reaches the table? This story was never just about fish. It was about a continent learning to trust its own hands. Sovereignty does not begin at borders. It begins at breakfast, when a mother feeds her child with food grown steps away. That is politics. When a village powers its own cold chain, that is power. When a region refuses to be ruled by distant tariffs, that is freedom. This is why the name Ibrahim Traoré echoes far beyond Burkina Faso, not as a myth, but as a reminder. Leadership can look like a pond dug by ordinary hands, and a future built without permission. The Sahel has changed, Africa has changed, and the world will feel the tremor. This time, the revolution did not begin with fire, it began with water, still water, silent water, the kind that gathers in a shallow pit of stubborn soil, and refuses to evaporate.